It's really cool turning around and seeing there's actually people here. Just letting you on a little secret. This is one of the scariest moments of a church planter's life. You come in and you're like, is there anyone gonna like this thing? But thank you for coming, even if you don't like it, put a smile on your face just for our sake. And I thought it was really important as well on our very first experience that we do a selfie. So, for those that don't know what a selfie is basically me taking a photo of myself with you guys in the background. So, can you help me out?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a couple of people that, I think we've got a few camera shy people here, but let's do this. So I don't know, I need to turn this around, don't I? This is a momentous occasion. You all need to be like happy. Give me your craziest happy smile face. You can wave at the camera as well if you want to. Alright. I think you guys are warming up. You'll just know that at Lift, we're really chilled out, we have a lot of fun, but we also honour the Word of God. And we're really excited to be able to share this morning, and God really put a word on my heart. I wasn't planning to speak this message. I was planning to talk about the whole purpose of the church and why we do what we do, but God put something on my heart and I was like, really, God? It's not so fun. But that's all right, and I started to really dive into this message. And the thing about this message is that it speaks to me first and foremost before it's for any. I'm not thinking of anyone when I talk about this, but this is really for me. And what I want to talk about is, you know, people talk about how time heals all things. Anyone heard that saying before? Yeah. Time heals all things. And many of us know that that's not actually true. You know what I mean? It's like, no, sometimes time doesn't heal anything. Instead, sometimes time makes things a whole lot worse. And we're left with this mess in our life, and like, come on, time, do your work, and time's not changing anything. But there's something else about time that I realized that is absolutely true, that time actually decays things. It actually, almost in a certain way, it kind of erodes things. Like, for example, when I was in high school, I really loved soccer. I still love soccer, but I was never really good at it. So what I did was that instead of being a skilled player that bamboozles people and gets through them, I was the bulldog terrier, you know? I'm the guy that chases down the lost courses. It's like the ball's about to, it's like 50 centimeters from going up, I'm still running after it as though it is not. I'm one of those guys that doesn't stop. Everyone's fast. I was a slow kid, but everyone's faster than me, but I didn't give up. And that was a thing that got me on teams, you know, when they're like, okay, I want you, and then I want you. I made sure I wasn't the last person by making sure people knew my commitment to the cause. That was what I was good at. And then high school finished, and I found out that my ability to chase the lost causes had decayed. And it was like my head was starting to tell my body, is like, what is the point? What's the point of chasing down those lost causes? And so I stopped. And then I realized that I was becoming that kid that got picked last. Because the one thing that I had going for me wasn't going anymore. And my energy decayed. Everyone had gone through that kind of season where you're like, wow, I'm actually not as fit as I used to be. I think for me the point was 17 turning 18, and then 24 turning 25 was the second time for me. And as I hit 30, I'm expecting the third one to come through. I used to love doing youth ministry, still do. And we used to have epic Friday nights, and then we have massive after youth hangs, and we'll go to McDonald's, and then we'd go to schools and play chasey. Yes, that's what we used to do as youth leaders, I don't know why. And we used to go to bed at 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and then after a while I was like, I can't do that anymore. And it started being midnight, and then it started being 11 o'clock. I'm expecting at some point that it's going to decay, so that 8 o'clock I'm going to be out like a light, and I'm just like, that's it, that's me done. You know what I mean? There's like this decay that is happening over time. And I don't just mean in a physical sense, I mean it in a heart sense. You know that new car that you bought? It was new for 2 months. It was amazing. And then somehow, over time, it stopped being a new car and it started being your emergency wardrobe. You know what I mean? It's like it's got a spare pair of shorts, spare pair of jacket for every occasion. In your car, it's now this wardrobe. It's got presentable clothes all the way to bum clothes, and you've got a whole rack in your car. And you know that new relationship that you got into, it was beautiful. It was so nice, and then somehow, sooner or later, that that partner's laugh that used to be so amazing and so cute suddenly becomes like, I don't know, like a cat dying or something like that, you know? And it just, time decays things, man. And we're left in this place where we're having to deal with all this decay. And that's what I want to talk about. Because one of the things that I realize decays in our lives over time is our dreams. Is when we get this amazing picture, and think back with me to that time that you actually tangibly could almost touch that dream that was in your heart or in your imagination. It was so amazing, and you're like, yes, that is it. Maybe you even started to form a plan, and this plan was amazing. I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to do this, and then this is going to happen. I'm going to step into that, and you were planning out your dream, and maybe some of you had the courage to even step out and make that plan work. And you saw some success, or maybe you saw a lot of success. But then I realized that in my life, the dream once was amazing. It was invigorating. It was full of excitement and energy for me. But one day that dream became a burden. And that plan that I had that was supposed to bring me to success suddenly became a chore. And I find myself quite often in my life where I'm like, man, I don't know, it's just a little bit too hard. And maybe we start to allow that dream to decay that little bit, and we start to just settle for second best in our lives. And I'm worried when this pattern happens because I strongly believe that God has actually created you for a purpose.
Yeah.
In Ephesians 2 verse 10, and see it on the screens if you don't have a Bible, but it says this, for we are His, being God. We are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand that we should walk in them. And I love this because I think that there is a design that God has created us with. We are His handiwork. We are His workmanship. And with this workmanship, I believe that there's this dream and this purpose that God has created you for. Each and every single person in this room was created with a design. You are not by accident. You are not just a product of two chance things happening at the same time. It is a product of God working you out, designing you, and placing a purpose in you. And it stands to reason that if we live out that purpose and that plan, that dream that God has placed in our hearts, that's when we're going to find fulfillment, joy, peace, and all of that kind of stuff. But if we're walking away from it, we're going to sense this emptiness inside of our hearts. And at the same time, I also believe that God is a good God. Anyone believes that? God's a great God. And if God has placed a design in you, He's not going to hold it back from you and then say, haha, I've got the trump cards. But God's saying, no, here is that card. Here is that design. And here is that plan. And I believe that many of us have had those moments where God has put that little dream in our heart that started to form and started to grow and started to get really exciting. For me, planting this church is that dream. It's part of that dream. And it was exciting. But let me tell you, there were times when it was hard. And it was like I hit the wall full on, and I was like, maybe this isn't a dream. And I'm wondering if some of you are in that place where the dream has started to decay and it's become more of a burden, more something that is dragging you along through life. Because I don't think it has to be that way. This morning I want to talk to you about stopping the decay. I believe that this is a message that is going to help you reach the fullness of what God has placed in you. Got a couple of keys that I'm going to be talking about, but to help me out, I want to draw an example from the Bible. It's about the Israelites leaving Egypt and going to the Promised Land. See, just to set it up, if you've watched the movie Exodus, Gods and Kings, follows a few of the details of the Bible, gives you a bit of a sense of what happens. But to give those who might not be so familiar with the story a bit of a recap, basically the Israelites were in 400 years of slavery. 400. And during that time, they were oppressed, they were put down, they had to do all the hard labor, they didn't get any of the benefits of their labor, and they started crying out to God, God, we can't take this anymore, come save us. And so God raises up a man named Moses. And Moses comes, and with him, God brings along 10 supernatural plagues that totally ruins the confidence of Pharaoh the king and allows the Israelites to leave Egypt. And God doesn't take them out of slavery, but he actually says, okay, now that you're out of slavery, I want to bring you to a land that you can own, that you can live in, that you can have peace, that you can have prosperity, and to settle, to build a nation. That was God's plan. That was God's dream. And so they start on this journey, and they move from Egypt, and they start going through the desert to the promised land. And you would think that that's a pretty amazing story. You would think that if you've experienced what God has done to bring you out of slavery, it's all good. You know that God's powerful enough to do anything. But somehow the Israelites didn't get this. And we find them complaining and doubting so often a journey. Just to give you a couple of examples of it, in Exodus 16 verse 3, it says, "And the people of Israel said to them," being Moses and the leaders, "Would that we had died by the hand of God in the land of Egypt, where we sat by the meat pots." I love that, meat pots. "And ate bread to the full, for you have brought us out into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger." A chapter later in Exodus 17 verse 3, the people again, they thirsted there for water, and the people grumbled against Moses and said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to kill us and our children and our livestock with thirst?" Still through this journey, God continues to affirm his promise again and again and again. He's going to bring them to the land. They're going to inhabit the land. It's going to be amazing. And here's where, to me, it gets a little bit out of hand. Because the Israelites got all the way to the cusp of the promised land. They were literally about to step foot into the promised land. But first they had to conquer this place named Jericho. And so Moses sends 12 spies into Jericho. And the 12 of them came back and they gave a disastrous report. 10 of them said, "We can't do it." And 2 of them said, "Yes, we can." The 10 of them managed to stir up the whole assembly so that they said this, Numbers 14, 2-4. "And all the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and Aaron. The whole congregation said to them, 'Would that we had died in the land of Egypt.'" Here we go again. They want to die in a place of slavery rather than be free. "Or that we would have died in the wilderness. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land to fall by the sword? Our wives and our little ones will become prey. Would it not be better for us to go back to Egypt?" And they said to one another, "Let us choose a leader and go back to Egypt." And as crazy as this story is, when we think about it, this is God who had done amazing miracles to bring them out of Egypt in the first place, which they were asking for. And then he provides food and water out of nothing while they were in the desert. He parts seas so that they can walk across some dry land. He destroys armies so that they can take territory. And here they are saying, "Let's go back to Egypt." And I'm wondering how many of us have hit that point in our lives where the dream has just gotten that little bit too hard. Where maybe we start to think, that used to be better. Where we think, man, I'm just going to turn around. And I'm wondering how many of us have got shattered God dreams in our lives that were never meant to be second best. That were never meant to be something that was too hard for us. Where it used to give us energy and hope, but right now it's just this burden that we don't know how to deal with. And in the midst of all these people, the Israelites, who were complaining and grumbling and saying, "I want to go back," there was one particular gentleman. He was the same as everyone else. Born a slave, oppressed, beaten down, and never given a chance. And then he sees what God has done, and he goes through the wilderness. Same experience as the whole congregation. But there was something different about this guy. In the midst of all the naysayers and all the put-downers, he still had something in his heart that didn't allow the dream to decay. And he was the man who actually led the whole of Israel into the promised land. It was the next generation because God punished the previous generation for their unbelief and they died in the wilderness. But Joshua survived that. And not just survived that, he went one step further and walked into the promised land. And that is the kind of person that I want us to be. That is the kind of person that I believe God has put aside for us to be able to overcome the odds, to be able to chase that dream and not allow the time decay to settle into our hearts and to pull us down. This man's name is Joshua, and he's such a role model for us. And while we might be able to take many things in his life, there's one particular passage that I want to draw on today, and it's in Exodus 33, 7 to 11. And it says this: Now Moses used to take the tent and pitch it outside the camp, far off from the camp, and he called it a tent of meeting. And everyone who sought the Lord would go out to the tent of meeting, which was outside the camp. Whenever Moses went out to the tent, all the people would rise up, and each would stand at his tent door and watch Moses until he had gone into the tent. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the entrance of the tent. Getting really sick of saying tent. And the Lord would speak with Moses. And when all the people saw the pillar of cloud standing at the entrance of the tent, all the people would rise up and worship, each at his tent door. Thus, the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face as a man speaks to his friend. When Moses turned again into the camp, his assistant Joshua, the son of Nun, a young man, would not depart from the tent. See, this was something Joshua did that was so different from everyone else. He stayed and he lingered in God's presence. But this message is not about how we need to spend more time with God. This message is not a beat-down message about, you know why you don't have your dream? Because you're not praying enough. This is not one of those messages. This is not what I'm intending to speak, because I think that there's something a little bit more practical that we can handle this morning. And there are two things that I took from this. And you guys ready for it?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
The first thing is this: the people you surround yourself with can either push you forward into your destiny or hold you back in the past. Now you're like, Nate, where do you see that from? I just saw a lot of words about a tent. How is this whole people thing happening? You see, when I was reading this, I started to see something really peculiar. The people distanced themselves from Moses. You know, when I first read this, I thought that the people wouldn't go near the tent of meeting because they were not allowed to. That this was Moses' special place, and somehow Joshua was, because being the second in command, he was allowed to go along. But something in that very same passage went against that, because it says, when everyone who sought the Lord would go to the tent of meeting, everyone. This was not a special, exclusive club. This was a place that God had set up for everyone to meet with him. But yet somehow when Moses went, everyone was like, I'm backing off. And I'm standing by my tent. And I started to wonder, why is that so? I think it's because there are people that are scared to take responsibility for what's going to happen in their lives. So they set a person up to lead them and say, you go do that. And if that person succeeds, they can go, I knew it all along. I was with you 100%. But if that person fails, they can go, I'm not with that man. And we can see that happening over and over again in the wilderness, where they're like, why did you bring us out into the desert to die? We should have stayed with our meat pots and our bellies full in Egypt. They were looking for a person to blame. They were looking to complain, and they were looking to just get a free ride without never ever committing themselves to the full journey. And therefore they distanced themselves from Moses, so that when Moses was getting direction for the future, they stayed by their tent. And so God had spoken truly to Moses and said, maybe you heard it wrong, because they were not having anywhere near to that place. They never committed, they were small-minded, and they were complaining doubters. But Joshua was different. Joshua chose to turn his back on the people who were small-minded and were tearing him down and said, I'm going to you, Moses. This is how I think it pans out in my head. Moses is like, okay, what do we need to do next? And he's like, I need to seek after God. And then they're like wildfire, and they're like a church gossip machine. It just spreads through the whole place. And everyone knows, oh, Moses is going to the tent. And so everyone stands outside their tent. And what Joshua does is like, and then everyone's happy standing outside the tent, but Joshua's like, Moses is going where? I'm there with him. Notice that everyone else stood at the outside of their own tent. And that means Joshua's family, that meant Joshua's friends, that meant everyone who was a naysayer in his life. He was saying, my dream that God has put on my heart is too important for me to stand at the door of my tent, but I need to go. And I need to go to the man that everyone hates, because that man's going to speak life to me. That man is going to be able to speak that dream into existence for me. Have you got people in your life that despite everyone else saying settle, they say this is what's happening? As Joshua walked with Moses, the conversations that they would have had, because the tent was outside the camp. It wasn't a short walk. It wasn't like what I did to get up onto this pulpit. It was outside the tent, the camp. And they would have to walk. And I'm imagining Joshua's like, so what do you think God's going to ask us to do? And Moses is like, well, we need to have faith. God's going to tell us. And he's like, okay, so how do we have faith? And then Moses is like, well, you listen to what God says, and then you believe it. And I'm thinking that he's having this one-on-one discipleship, mentoring, championing process where he's catching the heart of a person who has got more faith in him and has got a dream that's still burning in his heart, even though over 1 million people were saying, you can't do that. Have you got that person in your life? Have you got that people around you that can say, come on, mate, that's not what you're meant to be built for. That's not what God designed you for. God's got so much more for you. Have you got people doing that? Or do you have people around you who are standing outside their tent door, complaining and bagging out and tearing you down? See, the people around you will determine whether you will step into your destiny or whether they tell you go back to Egypt. Where they start to romanticize the 400 years of slavery and thinking that it's all about meat pots. It was never about meat pots. It was about whips on your back. That's what it was about. And for so many of us, we are not meant to be in Egypt. We're meant to be in the promised land. But something else happened. Because when Moses got the word that he needed to, and Joshua was standing outside the tent of meeting, and Moses went back in, Joshua stayed. And I think this is so important for us, because as much as people around us is important, we also need to have that relationship with God. And like I said before, this is not about, you need to spend more time with God. Because I realize I put aside days where I'm like, I really need to pray. I haven't prayed much. I really need to pray. Put aside a couple of hours, and during a couple of hours, I did everything but connect with God. I'm praying about the weather, I don't know, praying about lunch and when it's coming, you know, then, I don't know, I just like food. The main reason why we planted in Vic Park is because it's the best. I love the food here. But I've spent time, set aside, worship music, all of that, and still that connection wasn't that great. But then there have been other times where I've been going to a meeting and it's an important meeting and I don't know what to do, I don't know what to say. In that 20-minute drive that I got, and I'm seeking after God and I'm like, God, I need to know what you want me to do. In those 20 minutes, sometimes it's been more powerful, it's been more life-changing than the hours I've spent trying to pray. I'm not saying prayer is a bad thing. Prayer is an amazing, important thing. But if you think that prayer is about perfecting a practice, a discipline, then God is happy with you, then you got it the wrong way around. Because God's just wanting you to seek after Him. And I think that Joshua understood something. He understood that Moses was an important companion along his journey. Make sure you've got your Moseses that can champion you and can speak life into you. But he also knew that Moses was only a man. And he needed a source that was greater than a man. And that is God. That God is my strength. God is my shield. God is my source of courage. God is my source of boldness. Or am I looking to myself? See, the thing I realized about myself is that I thought that I had to prove myself to God so many times. I thought I let him down, and I thought that I wasn't good enough, and so I tried to perfect all these practices to get into God's good books, when I never realized that God is a good father. And all he wanted was for me to say, I love you, Dad, and I need you, Dad. And I love that in the coming weeks, we're going to be unpacking this 4-week series on security in God, because it's so important, and we're going to be exploring certain facets of it. And I'm hoping that there's a theme that will run through the life of this church, that we know who we are because we know who God is, and not so much what I've got and what I've got to prove or how much energy or courage I have in my life, but my source is in God.
Amen.
And I felt this message not because I had anyone to complain against, but it's because I know the journey ahead of me, personally, it's not going to be an easy one. Planting a church today is not the end goal. I'm not here go, woo, done it, time to go home, put that gold star, move on to something else. This is the beginning. This is the easy part. It is. It's not been easy sometimes, but this is supposed to be probably the easiest part of the journey. Because this is when things get real. And finances and people are amazing. I love people, but sometimes I hate them too. They're not nice. And we all know that. Do you have family? Sometimes they're amazing and so much encouragement, other times and I need to know that on my journey, I'm not going to let this dream decay. And in this inception of this church, this is not a church that is built for 3 weeks, had a good run, and then we pack up and we go home. This is a church that's meant to be significant and lasting and making a difference in this community for years to come. This is just the beginning. But dream can decay, and I know that I need to surround myself with people that are not looking to Egypt, that are not just standing at the tent door, but they're walking with me into the presence of God and saying, come on Nate, you can do it, come on Nate, this is a dream from God, don't you forget it. And we need those people, I need those people to stand with me. And I know God's brought an amazing team to plant this church, and if you're looking for a church family, I vouch for them. They are the best. They have encouraged me, they've spoken life into me, and they've said, come on, this is a dream, come on, they tell me that I'm dreaming too small. They tell me that this room is too small for this church. They tell me that things are going to be bigger, things are going to be better, and I'm like, come on. Woo. When I'm thinking about Egypt, they're like, no Nate, don't you dare. So if you ever need encouraging, if you need people to stand by you, you're in the right place. But I also know that in my life, with what I'm going to be facing, I need God as my source. There are going to be times where on a Sunday, I don't feel like standing here. And to walk up from that chair to this pulpit is still too far. And I know that in those moments, I'm like, God, it's you or nothing. And not just for this ministry, for my life, for my marriage. Am I surrounding myself with people that are championing us as a couple, saying you don't have to be another one of those statistics. You don't have to go through that. God's got something bigger for you. God's got something more for you. And then us knowing that God is the only one that can hold us together. Not that it's a hard job. Not that it's a big thing, but facing the statistics of the world, being married for more than, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, it's already getting, the odds are against us. But I believe that that's not how God intended it to be. And so I'm going to surround myself with people that are going to tell me marriage is the most amazing thing in the world. I'm not going to surround myself with people that are going to be, like, wait till you get older. and you've been married for 10 years, then you start to hate the smell of each other's face. I don't know, what do people say? But see, I've already distanced myself from that. I don't want any of that. I want people to say marriage just get better. Yeah. Marriage is like a wine, it keeps getting better with age. I want people like that. And I want God speaking to my life.
Yeah.
But this morning, I really believe, as we finish real soon, that maybe God has been speaking to some of you about how some of your dreams might have started to decay a little bit. How maybe you've given up on some of the things that you once thought were important, but now it's just a burden. Where maybe some things in your life is just too hard to cope with, and you don't know how to face tomorrow. Where you think that you don't have much to live for. I don't know where you're at on this spectrum. Maybe you're just a little bit discouraged. Maybe you're really discouraged. I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be that way. I'm here to tell you that there are people who are ready to champion you, who are ready to walk next to you, and who are ready to say, come on, mate, you can do it. Yeah. And I know that more than that, there is a God who is able to put in more than time can decay. Yeah. See, when God is our source, we don't have to be scared of anything. You know, I think that some people think that God can use a lot of His magic power and then He'll run out at some point and you're kind of scared to ask Him for more. God doesn't run out. The Bible says that our God is a God of exceedingly, abundantly, above and beyond. And so when I'm dry, and when I'm tired, and when I don't have enough, I'm not just expecting God to top me up so that I can get through tomorrow surviving. I know that God's going to go more and above and beyond. And that's what I want to talk to you guys about. I don't know where you're at in your life. But God is able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above and beyond. So we can get the band up this morning. I hope that this is a message that sets us up. For those that are sticking on this journey, for those who are encouraging us by being here this morning, thank you so much. You're the exact kind of person that I've been talking about. You're like, come on, Nate, dream bigger. Think that little bit bigger. Come on, imagine more. And I love it. Thank you so much. I lost my train of thought. Completely. So hi. Cool. Yes, thank you, Ben. That's why Beck's in the front row. But for those that are sticking on in this journey, things could get a little bit tough every now and then. Maybe even if you're from another church and you're heading back next week and it's all good. Thank you for supporting us today. But if you're discouraged, God's here today. And He's saying, come on, dream bigger. I designed you. That's what God's saying. I didn't design you to fail. I didn't design you so that you are insignificant. I didn't go, hey, that guy is standing up there, he's got it all, but you got nothing. You know, that's not God speaking. That's the enemy trying to take away your confidence. That's the enemy trying to cut you down. But this morning, each and every person here, you have been created with a design. You've been created for greatness. You've been created with tomorrow being better than today. You've been created so that opportunities are going to abound in your future and not just for today. You are created with a God that's able to do more tomorrow. And He's doing amazing things today, but dream about tomorrow. So for every person here, this is a message that's meant to encourage you. Yes, there's some practical things to do. Because the default position of our lives is to decay over time. But it doesn't have to be that way. We can all close our eyes. I just want to speak to people here this morning who might not know or might have walked away from this God that I've been speaking about. Maybe for you, you've been disappointed. And you thought that God doesn't like you, or that you couldn't even believe that there is a God. This morning, if I've been saying something that means something, that there's a stirring inside of your heart, there's no one looking around besides myself and just a couple of our team. We want to pray with you that God becomes so real for you this morning. You can come back to God, make God your source again, He's able to do exceedingly abundantly. Let me just tell you what God has done already. You know that sin, that stuff that you're doing wrong, that stuff that you're trying to prove yourself with, that's been dealt with. 2,000 years ago, God came to earth as Jesus. Jesus died on the cross so that your sin and shame no longer count against you. No longer count against you. And He set you up for a future with Him. And with Him all things are possible. So this morning, if that's you and you just want to reconnect with God or connect with God for the first time, all I'm asking you to do is just put your hand up really quickly. You can put it up and you can put it down again, just so that we know who we're praying with. Let's say this prayer together. Dear Lord Jesus, I know that I've sinned. I know I'm not good enough. But I thank you that you make me good enough. I invite you into my life. Come be my Lord and my Savior. Amen. Awesome, awesome. So you just put a verse up. If you declare with your lips and believe in your heart, you will be saved. It's as simple as it is. But then you've got a whole life in front of you. And let me encourage you, your future days are better than your current days. And there's greater things ahead of you than there is even right now. There are opportunities in your future that you don't know about. And I'm speaking this in faith. I'm speaking this as your Moses maybe right now to say, come on, church. Let's rise up. Let's go through our Mondays to Fridays, knowing that God is using us for significant things. And it's great and amazing and wonderful. And come on, I think we just need to praise God this moment. So we just stand with me.